What's up, everybody? It's Tom Ryan.
And today we're going to talk about the best settings for getting good, solid, smooth, slow motion video. Well, like I said, I'm Tom Ryan, and today we're going to go over slow motion video and how to get the best, smoothest, most crisp slow motion that you can possibly get. The best settings, the right settings. There's correct settings that you're supposed to use. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do. Hopefully you'll learn something. Do you like photography, filmmaking, tech, and content creation?
Hellis.
Considering you're interested in all those things, you might want to hit the subscribe button down below. It's kind of what this channel is based around. It's kind of what I'm interested in. And I want to share videos with you guys that I have fun making. So yes, there are correct settings that you're supposed to use when shooting slow motion as opposed to shooting video that's supposed to be viewed in real time. When you're shooting video, you want to make sure you know what you're going to do with it. If you're going to shoot it and you're going to edit it in real time, you want to shoot it at 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. You want to shoot at a specific frame rate for actual real-time footage, whereas when you're shooting slow motion, you want to shoot at 60 frames a second or 48 maybe, I don't know, or 120 frames a second. Most cameras can do at least 60 FPS, but yeah, when you're shooting, you want to kind of shoot for the edit. You want to know what you're shooting and know how you're shooting, because there are correct settings that you're supposed to use when shooting slow-mo versus real-time. You can't really mix and you can mix and match, but you don't really want to. You want to know exactly what you're going to do while shooting, what you're going to do in the editor. Let's just get into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is shutter speed, and shutter speed is essential. It's the number one thing. If you don't get any other settings right, get this one right, because it'll make your slow motion look as smooth as possible and as natural as possible. When shooting slow motion video, or shooting any video for that matter, take your frame rate and double it. Now you have the number that you should be using for the shutter speed. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, 48 would be double of 24. And you can't really get 48 on most cameras. Cinema cameras will do 48, 1/48 of a second. But DSLRs and what you're probably shooting on, maybe a mirrorless camera, they can usually do 1/50th. They don't go to 1/48th for some reason. So just use 1/50th. It's close enough to 1/48th that it won't make a difference. But if you're shooting 60 frames per second or you're shooting 120 frames per second, this rule still applies. So 60 frames per second, you're gonna shoot 1/120 as your shutter speed. And for 120 frames per second, you're gonna do 1/240. Now my camera can't do 1/240, so I do 1/250, but it's close enough. It's in the general range that you can kind of swing it. It's not gonna make much of a difference. So this is the number one rule for shooting any video, but specifically getting smooth slow motion. Most people that are watching right now are probably wondering why their slow motion doesn't look smooth, or it kind of looks choppy. And there's one main reason for that. It's probably because your shutter speed is not correct. Now I know some of you video shooters, and I myself actually shoot in a flat profile when I'm shooting video, because I want to have the most dynamic range in my image that I can possibly have, so we can take it into post and we can color grade it, and I want full flexibility over my footage. However, when we're shooting slow motion video, it's most likely you're gonna actually drop resolution. What I mean is, I shoot Sony, and so my camera shoots 4K resolution at 24 up to 30 frames per second. But when I want to shoot slow motion, when I want to shoot slow motion, I'm shooting at 1080p, because that's the only thing that my camera is capable of. Even at 60 FPS, it can only shoot at 1080p, which is nuts because the iPhone X came out before this camera and that can shoot 4K 60, so get on that, Sony. So most of the time you're going to be shooting at a lower resolution, and probably 100% of the time you're going to be shooting at a lower quality. There's a difference between resolution and quality, but we're not going to get into that right now. So when shooting lower quality video to begin with, you don't really want to shoot too flat. You can shoot flat, but not too flat. Now Sony and Canon tend to be the worst ones at this because they don't shoot 4K 60 or 4K slow motion. Panasonic is a little bit better at this because it's better quality overall. It can shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, and there's less compression overall. But when shooting slow motion, just try not to shoot too flat. If you shoot too flat, you're gonna end up pushing those colors a little bit too much, and when you're shooting at a lower resolution or even just a little bit lower quality, your image is gonna break apart easier. So for Sony shooters, I would say stay away from S-Log3 entirely. Don't shoot S-Log3 if you're shooting slow motion video. And in general, you don't want to be too flat. So you're shooting Sony, you're shooting Canon, you're shooting Panasonic. It's just probably smarter to keep it on a little bit more of the contrasty, saturated side. Don't shoot too flat. You don't want to have to push those colors too much. Here's an example of a shot from the other day where I went out and I shot S-Log3 and I shot Cine 4 at 120 FPS. And you can see this shot right here is at 120 FPS in S-Log3. And if we zoom in, you can kind of see there's a lot of grain there. I pushed the colors a lot because I had to get that contrast back. Personally, I don't think S-Log3 is good for Sony cameras at all. It's just a little bit too flat, even when shooting in 4K. And so we switch over to Cine 4, and I didn't have to push these colors as much. And so that's why we're getting a little bit less noise, and we were at a lower base ISO, because the base ISO for S-Log3 is 800, whereas Cine 4 is 200. Lastly, we're going to talk about high bit rates and low ISOs. But before we do that, I want to thank the sponsor of this video. All of my affiliate links down in the description below. If you click on any of those, I get money, so click on them because money is literally like... I just want to give a quick disclaimer. You don't have to buy anything. I was just kidding. Like, that was just a joke. So let's move on to high bit rates and low ISOs. High bit rates, basically all 4K is not made the same. All quality isn't made the same. All resolution isn't made the same. The higher your bit rate is, the more quality you have per frame. So obviously then it's a higher quality video in general because a frame is just one part of a video. So when you're shooting slow motion, just shoot at the highest bit rate that you possibly can, because this is going to eliminate some of the artifacting and breaking down of images. When shooting at lower resolutions and shooting at lower qualities, use the highest one that you can get. Most likely your camera's not going to shoot at a higher bit rate of slow motion than it is at real-time quality, but just shoot at the highest one that you can. It's going to keep the degradation of your video to a minimum. You might already know this, but shooting at higher ISOs is going to affect your video, and usually in a bad way. Even if you're shooting in 4K, your video is just not going to look as good at ISO 3200 versus ISO 100. It's just always going to look more clean at ISO 100 or just any ISO that's lower. So we already talked about the fact that when you're shooting slow motion video, it's going to be lower quality. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? If higher ISOs result in worse quality, and we're already starting off with worse quality, try your best to shoot at lower ISOs. So the best thing that you can do in this situation is to use faster lenses, like a lens that's 1.8 aperture or 2.8 aperture or 1.4. If you want to keep your ISOs low and keep your shutter speed exactly where it is, shoot with faster lenses, shoot with lenses that can go wider in aperture, and just let as much light in as you can. So here's a shot at 8000 ISO, 1080p, 120 FPS, and if we zoom in here, you can just see this grain is just disgusting. It's turning into noise, it's turning into digital like RGB noise, and it just looks gross, and you don't want to have to deal with this. And because we're shooting at 1080p, there's just really nothing we can do about this. We're not going to get clean images at higher ISOs, but what you can do is open up your aperture a lot to get some light in there. So here's a shot at 200 ISO, 1080p, 120 FPS. And if we zoom in here, we can see that those blacks, those shadows, there's no grain at all. It's nicely exposed, and there's really nothing to worry about. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. I sure did. It's that if you go outside during the day, you don't have to shoot 8000 ISO, okay? But I didn't have an ND filter, so my bad. Jeez. Anyways, even if you knew how to shoot slow motion video already, I hope you learned anything from this video, whether it was shooting lower ISOs or shooting better, higher bit rates, something. At least if you learned something from this video, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and tell me what you think. I also want to know, what do you prefer? Do you prefer real-time shots? Do you prefer slow motion shots? Some people prefer both. I don't know. I like to mix them together personally, but what do you guys think? Leave a comment down below and tell me what you think. Hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this, but that's gonna do it for this video, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.